I just have a few remarks I wanted to make before we really get started, because I think we're all here to really hear what the chief has to say to us. But our family has been down in this area since 1961, and many of us are long-term stakeholders and owners of businesses. And I think we can all agree that running a business is a challenging and difficult entity in its own right. Believe it or not, the economic engine of this area, we did a study several years ago, is over $2 billion a year of business. And it's probably a little bit higher today. I would say maybe even getting up close to $3 billion. We provide and maintain jobs for hundreds of people. We pay a tremendous amount of taxes, both state and local, and of course federal. And we do this in an area that faces serious threats to public safety and social order. I think you can all agree with that. And as I was thinking of my remarks for the day today, it's hard for me not to feel anger, frustration, and disappointment. The anger is in a system in which our policy is being dictated by the courtroom. Frustration in city agencies that have been hamstrung in their ability to provide enforcement of city codes and laws. And most importantly, my disappointment in city leadership that fails to treat what's occurring in our streets as a crisis that requires swift and decisive action that not only helps the stakeholders, but also the people living on the streets. I think all of us, really what we're looking for is we want to contribute to our community. I am particularly proud of being an Angelino. I'm a second generation. My grandfather was an LAPD police officer for 32 years. And I love going around the world. My business is an international business, and I love talking up the city of LA. But when I see what's happening around us, and I have people that come here, they almost can't believe what they see. And this is people that come from third and second world countries. They're amazed at what they see on the streets here. But I think we really want to promote what we do here in the city and provide jobs. But I think also for many of us who've been down here as long as we have, we also want to be part of the solution to what has probably become the biggest social crisis that the city has ever faced, which is homelessness. So we're here today we do this annual board meeting. And for the board members who are here, and again want to thank them, the people here provide a tremendous amount of their time, committee meetings and the board meetings that we do throughout the year to try to keep some semblance of normalcy to this area. And I think what we want to do is always try to accomplish these objectives of trying to make this area better for all of us. That's the whole point of why we established the BID in the first place. But unfortunately, and I hate to say this, we don't feel like we've seen a lot of progress. And this is something that repeats itself year on year. We're seeing the same number of unsheltered individuals on our sidewalks. I think we're all very concerned about the safety and health for our employees, our customers, our tenants. And unfortunately, I think if you don't know, we were declared a typhus zone earlier this year. A very sad statement about what's going on. But there's a little bit of beacon of light, and really it's the reason we're here today, which is the BID and what the BID does for us. We all pay a share of our property taxes toward funding the organization, and what I'd like to say is the people that are out working for us on the streets, our officers, our maintenance crews, these people do an unbelievable job. If you've ever had any interaction with them, it's tremendous. And not only that, we're doing it through an organization in which these are people who were perhaps formerly homeless, drug addicts, chrysalists. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that these people are working for us, and I think trying to take that step and put their lives back in a proper order. That for me is very important. I think we all have that sense of compassion for people. We want to see people improve their lot in life. But also, the people that are here, the stakeholders. We are the BID. Our budget is over $2 million that we use to pay for these services. And what we try to get from that is peace of mind for not only ourselves, but for our tenants, our employees that work for us. And our BID is also, and we have a fabulous executive director in Estella Lopez, and Estella, thank you as always. I can't begin to tell you how fortunate we already have somebody of not only her caliber, but the quality of person that she is and what she represents. We are very fortunate to have her on our team. She helps us advocate to the city, interact with LAPD, and help us try to solve these, what might be defined as pretty much almost unsolvable problems is what it seems like. One of the things that, if you didn't see it on your chair today, we put this together. It kind of shows you what the bid does and how much, especially from a maintenance standpoint and security calls too. I think Stell's going to be talking about this later on, but the work these people do is just tremendous in its scope and scale when you look at the amount of trash. And I don't know, frankly, what this area would look like if it wasn't for the bid. I don't think the city could possibly keep up with the amount of debris and the number of calls that we actually get for security-related issues. There's just not enough resources at LAPD that could possibly handle what we ask of our BID. Another important part is, frankly, engagement and involvement of the stakeholders. We formed this organization over 30 years ago, and part of it was to give ourselves a voice at City Hall. And I would encourage those that don't come to the board meetings to do so. I think it would be very much a positive benefit to have more people involved in what we're trying to accomplish in the area. To close here, maybe I come across as a little bit not hopeful, but I want to say that I like to look at things. I'm the kind of guy that looks at things where the glass is half full, not half empty. And every year I look at the opportunity that we might be finally stemming the tide and taking the turn in the right direction and what we can do with this area. With the monies we've received, or the city has received from the two propositions that went through, I'm hoping now that with some resources we can start tackling some of the street homelessness that's out there. And that hopefully our leadership at City Hall really embraces the urgency that frankly this area needs to stem that tide. And then finally, I really hope that we'll see some positive change for the area this year, just a little bit. I think if we all saw just a little bit of change, I think it would give us that little glimmer of hope that we're all looking for.
I am here today to do a couple things. First is to say thank you to this group. This is one of the bids that exists across the city that is making a difference. That is absolutely in the absence of your participation, your partnership, you're digging in and taking hard-earned revenue and resources that your businesses gather each day as you're trying to make ends meet. This bid is a burden, and it's something that takes away from your bottom line. And as every business has to continually struggle to find ways to stay profitable, to provide a return to its investors, to its owners, to stay relevant in a highly competitive market that is increasingly filled with turmoil. I understand that just how many things are pulling at you. And so for you to continue to make this investment in this business improvement district, you have a debt of gratitude from a cop and from our men and women of this organization of LAPD, and as a citizen of the city, because in the absence of your work, Mark is exactly on point. The challenges that we have would be so much more substantial and would be even gloomier than the introduction of what we described this morning. I want to thank Stella for the invitation, but also your leadership throughout the years in the downtown area. You've been an organizer, you've been a person that has been a partner with here since I was a captain in late 90s in this community. So your leadership has been consistent, and you've been a partner, and you've seen us in good times and bad times, and as we open up today and as we move forward into tomorrow and the next day, and as we move into 2019, it's people such as yourself and organizations such as this bid that I'm confident that we will see brighter times. I want to thank the two men that are up here as representatives of Central and Newton area. We also had George Rodriguez step in, Commander Rodriguez, who is the assistant to Assistant Chief Arcos, Bobby Arcos, who's on vacation this week, some well-deserved time away. So George, I appreciate you being here, as well as John McMahon, and of course the senior leads, people who actually get the work done. We come, we talk, and and have some wonderful muffins around the corner that have a great badge on top of them. So I just don't want to touch them. But they're the men, and really the men and women that are out there right now that are doing the work. I get to tell their story. With my appointment as chief, this is my 38th year within LAPD. I came on in October of 1981, and never imagining that I would be a chief. I was the first in my family to even have a public sector job. We were one of 5 kids, and a family that moved all over the United States to basically find work, just trying to make ends meet. And as I entered a profession of policing, and I was wanting to make a difference and wanting to have a job that had offered excitement, offered service, that offered the belief at the end of the day that I was moving. I was part of something bigger than myself and moving in the service of people. I'm a person of faith, and so I believe that we're all here for a short time. And while we're here, we have much of expected of us to try to help and provide for a safer community. And 37 plus years later, as I tell a recruit class, I would trade with them in a second to start this journey again. It's been a tremendous opportunity, and we've all had our dark days. I've seen this organization change and evolve, I believe for the better, but we've also, in my period of time, lost 50 officers in the line of duty deaths. So we've seen dark moments, and we've seen troubled times with crises where even from within, we've failed ourselves as an organization, where our rank and file or people within us have brought embarrassment to this badge. But again, I've also seen organization rise up and the city rise up, whether it be the DNC, be it the aftermath of the earthquake in Northridge. It'd be the more recently with the year after year reductions in crime. And so as I stand here today with Chief Beck's retirement, I had the opportunity to put my name in the hat and pursue this opportunity, because I believe that there's more work to be done. And I believe that with my background that I was well suited and would be the right individual at the right time to take us into this next decade of service. So with that, I will tell you that I want to get to questions and answers with you. I want to get to some conversations specific to this bid and this downtown Skid Row industrial area. But more globally, I want to talk about a few things about where I see LAPD at now, how I intend to frame, and as we're rolling out in the first 6 months here, where we're going. As a guiding philosophy, I've inherited a great department. Chief Beck, in the last his nearly 2 terms of service, 8+ years, following Chief Bratton, I believe set us up for success. I was part of his team, Chief Bratton's team, and we, I believe that you can expect largely the same type of problem solving, smart policing, data-driven, evidence-based, a compassion, a partnership-based orientation as we move forward. So as we see deployment practices, as you look at the way we've bolstered certain portions of the city, whether it be the Skid Row area with Reset, whether it be the Hollywood Entertainment District, or it be the Venice Beach, areas and where we've seen challenges and problems to public safety, we will continue to bolster those deployments above and beyond what our scarce resources and algorithms of workload suggest that we would put people. So that is a liberty that we began about 15 years ago, and I intend to continue. Secondly, our engagement with the community, we've got to find ways of deepening that. So our community safety partnerships, what we've established beginning about 8 years ago, were dedicated teams in our most violent and historically violent plagued communities, such as Nickerson Gardens, Jordan Downs, Ramona Gardens, Harvard Park. Those are areas that you're going to see small micro neighborhoods that we're going to continue to dedicate about 10 officers to form relationships with communities of multiple generations that, for whatever reason, have persistently seen high levels of shooting violence and death and loss of life. I believe in the last 8 years, in each instance where we've been able to make a community safety partnership exist, we have seen community safety levels improve and the trust and confidence in LAPD improve in communities that previously had a distrust and believed that we were instead an occupier rather than a partner. So we're opening our next iteration of that in Captain Rimkunas' command in South Park with the support of the local council office, the redevelopment of South Park in February of this coming year. That'll be the next iteration of a community-defined partnership with us that has a presence of officers that remain in that area for about 5 years. That their focus is not necessarily enforcement. In fact, their focus is that how do we build relationships and trust and dissolve, if you will, the mechanisms that seemingly create and fester and allow for violence to occur, street violence. So as we work on those areas, my initial matters coming out of the organization has been some tweaking, some redesign. Because as much as I am a person that has inherited a great department, I'm also an individual that, people always say, well, are you going to change anything? And I've always loved it. Well, of course not. I'm just going to kind of watch and breathe this all in. I'll make changes, I'm sure, over time. I've been in leadership positions long enough to know that the answer to that is yes, things will change. As each of us are individuals, we see things a little bit different through a little bit of a different prism, and we're going to make adjustments. Not as much adjustments as some administrations make with the appointment of a new chief or sheriff, but nonetheless, we will make some adjustments. And we have, in making those adjustments, I've had the opportunity to make some promotions, to realign the organization where I believe we can improve our community engagement, we can bring greater focus to it, and results of developing our volunteers, of developing our reserves, of deepening our youth services programs, and ensuring that the community safety partnerships become an institutional practice and not just a hybrid or an initial pilot. That was a portion of our realignment. We've also taken our traffic resources, and as a city that suffers so many fatalities on our roadway, we've mustered those resources into one organizational unit to improve our coordination and the delivery of our traffic safety efforts. As a department, across American policing, nowhere else in the country do they have as many resources on traffic safety as we do here in Los Angeles. Nearly 700 officers work, whether in a motor or a black and white or investigatively, on traffic deaths and hit and runs and DUIs. And it's for rightful reasons. We've lost over 200 people, citizens. We had a fatal this morning to traffic collisions and deaths. And many times those are as a result of a DUI or a result of a reckless driver. So, but mustering them together under one command has been an effort to coordinate better those scarce resources so that we are organized and better organized to deal with a phenomenon that's growing here in the downtown area as well, which is street racing. The proliferation of bands of people that via social media and modern technology are moving about the city. So we've made a couple of those adjustments, and then lastly, I've moved forward efforts to do a couple things to improve the morale of the rank and file. Because as I came on, I heard very clearly the concern that our workload is increasing, particularly dealing with the humanitarian crisis of our generation being homelessness, and the impact that it's having on our call load, on the burden that our officers face in responding to challenges, both whether it's created by people experiencing homelessness or other challenges that are out there. Today we have 45,000 more radio calls that our officers have responded to this year versus last. That is an increase, a double-digit increase in workload that we have to recognize. We conducted an internal survey just out of the gate with my appointment in the end of June, and we published the results a month later. And it showed that our officers were concerned about their workload, their morale, because of what we're asking for them to get accomplished. So I've got to change the workload that our people have. We've also got to update our technology. We found very clearly that officers are tasked today with some of the best technology. They're each wearing body-worn videos, which is 21st century technology. Problem is, they take nearly 400,000 reports a year in the same way we took them 20 years ago, meaning they go back to the station, they sit in front of a computer. The computer at the station is somewhere in the area of 5 to 8 years old, and we have 8,000 of those. And so the challenge with this is they're tasked with completing in archaic legacy systems reports using digital evidence. And if you've ever tried to use any modern application today on an old machine, you know how frustrating that is. And so we've got to update our technology, we've got to modernize the way we take our reports, because today over half of our people's time is spent administratively taking reports and completing those reports. So we've got a big agenda in front of us. Lastly, we put together a series of working groups, because while I've got ideas and I see things, all of us always have a file that says, here's some ideas about where we're going. Whenever that file's empty, it's time to retire. But as a business owner, as a family person, we all have ambition of where are we going next? What does the next 5 years hold? What does the next 10 years hold? And how am I going to evolve and stay relevant? And as an organization, I bring to the table some of those ideas. But I also know that I've got 13,000 men and women that, as you know, with your employees, the real innovation comes from the people who are doing the work. They ask ourselves, why do we keep doing it this way? Why are we filling out this box? Or why are we taking care of this notification? And you find out that it was done because somebody 20 years ago made a mistake. So now we've established a rule. And we will now work our butts off to never repeat that one mistake ever again. But it's costing us so much in resources that it's dragging us away from our primary mission. So we've establishing these working groups. They've come back with some reports, and we are now looking at those reports, and they're going to shape the agenda for 2019 about things that we're going to stop doing or things that we're going to do differently, so that our officers have more time to frankly just be in the field and work and do their work and have contacts with communities in which they serve. Ideas of that will be, you can expect more online reporting. For years we've resisted taking reports online for some fear that we might see an increase in crime, because people would be more readily available to make reports rather than causing them to go to a station, rather than causing them to wait for an officer to come to their house. That is, in my mind, the wrong-headed view about not having an efficient system. So the first thing we did in July was we opened and began taking theft reports online. A theft report, when a person leaves their phone here at Starbucks or otherwise and then comes back and wonder why it's missing. They were just going to the bathroom for a few minutes. And previously we would only take that report online if it was lost. Today we're taking those reports online for thefts as well when there's no suspect information. There's no information about who may have taken that. And the reason is because rather than taking an officer out of the field for an hour to complete that report can be completed by a community member. You can have your electronic copy, you can take care of whatever insurance matters you're going to pursue on that, and investigatively, those reports weren't going anywhere. They're going to the same file cabinet that they'll go to now. But we've taken off the front end. We take nearly 20,000 hit and run reports every year that are property damage only with no suspect information. Meaning you come out to your car in a parking lot and some Yahoo, that's an official description of a suspect, has dented your car, taken out a review mirror or done some type of minor damage to your vehicle. You have no idea who's responsible for it. You've experienced a hit and run. That's going to take an officer about 2.5 hours on average to respond, get to you, fill out the necessary paperwork, and file that away so you have an insurance report. That is, in my mind, doesn't make sense. We're looking at other agencies, and we're seeing that a number of other agencies allow you as a community member, we can either come and take that report, or you can provide the information online, and if there are information that we need, we'll reach out and contact you, and we'll work more effectively, save you time, and put more officers on the field. Today, those traffic officers handle less than 50% of all traffic collision investigations in the city. Do you want to know who's handling the other 50%? Are patrol officers. So these are patrol officers that are then being taken off the field, and they're not handling radio calls and they're not handling services that they can do in a community. So where we're going in 2019 is that we're going to continue to be guided by 3 principles. We're going to police with a purpose, meaning what we do has to map right back to why we exist, which is to safeguard the lives and properties of the people and communities that we serve in Los Angeles. If we're involved in an activity that doesn't map back to that, just as you have in your business, what are we doing? Is this mapped back to my bottom line? And if it does, then it's work that you invest in. If it's not, then you're trying to shed that work for the efficiency of your industry, because it pulls away from your bottom line. It's the calculus you use about whether or not this bid is relevant to you. What return is it giving to you? I have the same responsibility as a chief. What are the responsibilities of the activities that we're engaged in? Does it map back to the safety of Los Angeles? Secondly, is what is our compassion? How are we policing as we go out and do our work? The rights of victims, the rights of communities, the rights of business owners, the rights of suspects themselves, individuals that offend. How are we providing for the dignity and respect, and at the same time protecting communities from individuals who would prey on them? And we have to demonstrate that compassion in our work. Lastly, it's partnerships. LAPD has been about partnerships for years, but I talk about this, and I'll get into homelessness next, is that we have a partnership of a shared responsibility of public safety in the city. And you're going to hear from me, if you haven't heard already, that every solution is not a policing solution. The description to this point about homelessness, the agencies I heard today were policing and BIDs and you. I did not hear about mental health. I did not hear about LASA. I did not hear about housing. I did not hear about other social programming and services. I heard about policing. I didn't hear about sanitation. I didn't hear about street services. I heard about elected officials. So what I am about is that for policing in Los Angeles, this homeless crisis, which is a crisis without question, 809 people died in cities in this county last year homeless. 56 people died in the Northridge earthquakes. We turned the world upside down for the Northridge earthquakes. And we saw the loss of life, and it was terrible, and the loss of property, and the loss of businesses, and our transportation system, but we handled that and the sheltering challenges that came from it as an emergency, as an absolute crisis. I believe that we are beginning to do that here with homelessness. But as my time as chief, I am not going to be the Lone Ranger. LAPD is not going to solve this issue. We're going to be a partner. You can absolutely depend that we are going to be accountable for what work we can do. However, we're also not going to get tripped into doing policing in a manner that results in us being vilified within the very communities that we're trying to serve. And I'll use an example, gang crime and the coke epidemic, the rock cocaine epidemic of the 80s. Much was said about policing, and we had a chief that I worked for. He brought me on the department in 1981 that was going to put a war on gangs. We were going to erase the scourge that these drug houses brought to Los Angeles. And LAPD led Operation Hammer and other types of heavy enforcement endeavors. And this city went up in flames. In the 1930s, during the Oklahoma Dust Bowl, where thousands of people, migrants, moved from that disaster and moved to California, and caravans came. This city sent LA police officers to the Needles border in trench coats and shotguns and turned Okies around and sent them back. We look at the other social issues across the city, and from time to time we've looked at policing. We look about the graffiti vandals. In the early 90s, we had senior leads painting out graffiti. They'd have weekends, and their tasking was to identify and track where graffiti was, and then gather paint and resources to remove the graffiti. And I got a little bit of paint on myself as well. But today, of course, if you saw officers painting out graffiti, would we look at it and go, that's kind of stupid to be using an officer to paint out something that I can hire a community-based organization or volunteers that will address? We should investigate graffiti, identify those vandals, but the removal of it needs to be done by the right part of a social network. Proud of the BIDs that have grown up in the last 20, 30, 25 years, because you have taken tasks that many people saw as policing. And so going forward, I'm all about a conversation that says, as partnerships develop, we sit around a table, we're not the head of it, and we have a role and responsibility of our portion and a bully pulpit to talk about what other portions of that shared responsibility needs to step up. And what I mean by that is, and I'm proud of the work that the city has done, but it needs to increase, is deepening our sanitation services. We have many efforts out there, but I'm looking for more in support of realizing 50,000 plus people in the county are living on the street. Think about your own home and how often that trash can gets filled up in your kitchen. I have 2 bins, it's just my wife and I, and it's like, why is this full already? I haven't even been home. But now you're living on the street and there is no trash can, or the trash can you have is full. And then you have businesses that see that, and I'll say just flat out, that take advantage of that, and they'll mix in with that their own trash and debris. And then they blame it on others, individuals, other than themselves. Homeless people do not produce cardboard. There's not a machine out there someplace producing cardboard. That is coming from our own businesses. And so with that, I make those observations to say, okay, let's talk about this clear-headed. Let's work and be committed to moving forward, getting more sanitation. We need to grow up as a city and build shelters. We need to build shelters throughout the city. I live in Hollywood, and we need to build, and we have homeless people who have found and attracted their way to Hollywood. And the people who say, well, we should have we should have shelters, or we should have bridge housing, however you want to frame it, temporary or permanent supportive housing. Each of those resources we need. And the idea, though, that we're going to put them in Palmdale or Lancaster, well, my first home was in Palmdale. Actually, it was in Lancaster. It's a nice area, but it's not relevant. The courts have told us you need to have functionally accessible housing. Functionally accessible isn't, I'll put you on a train and send you a couple hours away and that's where you can live. We're not the people that we were in the 30s where we turned people away and said, go someplace else. It's not them. This is about us. So my point is as we move forward into 19, let's build our services. Let's continue to deepen. The tons that you're removing, we're now capturing. The tons of trash that sanitation is removing. I'm seeing double-digit increases in the percentage of increase of how much material they're gathering. And so there is evidence that there's a current, that there is a process, and that the process is getting revolutions. Now the point of this is, however, we're all smart enough, and as you know as business people, just moving isn't evidence of progress. You know, you can just sit there and spin your wheels, and so I'm not suggesting that all this trash removal, that placement of people in supportive housing, that trying to find alternatives, that as those monies come on board and resources are being spent and invested, that the problem is solved. I drove here as well as you did today, and I see hundreds of people that are still blocking sidewalks, living on the street, living in conditions that we need to continue to build our capacity and strategies to give them an alternative. And in instances in which people who choose that lifestyle, if you want to call it that we govern them in a manner that does not impose on the liberties and rights of other individuals. That is the balance. And so for Los Angeles, for LAPD specifically, I've got courts and others that have said you have to have that balance where in the absence of housing, in the absence of alternatives, your enforcement is a violation of the Constitution. And while we can all argue about whether that's true or not, I am a person, as every member of this organization, that is sworn to uphold the Constitution, the Constitution of the State of California, and the laws. And I will not violate the law, nor will I ask my people to violate the law in order to reach an end that others in the conversation believe should be achieved. So that striking balance, I look forward to talking with you more about this, but I want to hear your thoughts and give you feedback to help round out my conversation, because I went off my notes a long time ago. But I want to talk to you and give you a certainty that you're going to have a chief that's representing these men and women and try to tell their story, try to get them resources, try to improve us and get us ready for the Olympics in 10 years. We've got a growth pattern, we've got things we need to do, but right now, we've got to get them technology, we've got to get them a more manageable workload, And I've got to balance the conversation that when policing is done in the city, people appreciate that there are limits to what we can do, and that while we're around the table to talk about changes that need to occur with laws, changes that need to occur with court decisions and so forth, that our work is to stay apolitical and to talk and provide information about what we see as working and not working. So with that, hopefully that's given you something to ask questions about or give me feedback and remarks, and I look forward to having this ongoing conversation.